Well, Europe was a fascinating experience because I was the chief of chaplains for the 7th Medical Command, and the Medical Command had over 100 clinics and hospitals throughout Europe. So I had the opportunity to travel all over Europe, visit my chaplains. I had about 65 chaplains who were working for me in various locations, including Berlin. And at that time, Berlin was East Berlin. It was East Berlin, West Berlin, and so forth. And we would be able to go there unimpeded. We had carry what were called flag orders, which would allow us to drive from West Germany through East Germany into Berlin. And I made many such trips. And one winter night, I was driving with a member of the Jewish community in Heidelberg, because Heidelberg, interestingly enough, had a Jüdische Hochschule, that a Jewish university, which was attached to the University of Heidelberg. And so we had a number of scholars, both Jewish scholars from Israel and the United States coming in. The rector or the dean of that school at that time was Professor Julius Karlbach, who was the first cousin to Shlomo Karlbach. And so I would Friday nights conduct services in Heidelberg at the Mark Twain Chapel. There was an area called Mark Twain Village. And Mark Twain had spent time in living in Heidelberg, and Mark Twain was an Novius world. He was a very strong supporter of Jews and Judaism. And then Shabbos morning, I would walk downtown. Of course, there was the Jüdische Gemeinde, the German synagogue, and in fact, I had given up. I could have had as a colonel, I could have had a big house about 5 miles from the center of the city, but that would have been impossible for me to walk. So I took an apartment. We had it. My family and I, the apartment was a little less than 2 miles from downtown. And so it was an opportunity for me to also be not only the army chaplain, but I was the only rabbi in Heidelberg that time. So I was sort of the Rav of the German shul. So, I'd give Divrei Torah in my broken German, my Yiddish. I speak fairly fluent Yiddish because I grew up with 2 Jewish grandmothers in the house. And so, meine Damen und Herren, ladies and gentlemen, I talk and so forth. And
Yiddish.
Sehr gut. So anyway, traveled all over Europe. We were there when the Berlin Wall came down. I was literally there at that time.
Wow.
And, there was a French politician who said, I love Germany so much, I'm glad there are 2 of them. So for the Jewish community, it wasn't necessarily a very joyous time because, while the communists controlled half of Germany, it meant that the Germans could not, do what they did in World War II. What I did is I had my son Jeff with me, and we were able to go into East Berlin, and we were able to exchange dollars for East German marks. You couldn't normally do that because the East Germans wanted the same exchange rate as the West German exchange rate. But in reality, they were trying to get hard currency, so they would dump a lot of their East German marks in West Germany. And if you had the equivalent of diplomatic immunity or you were in the military, you could buy, whereas the German mark was like 175 to the dollar, the East German mark could be as much as 15 to the dollar.
Wow.
So if you went into East Berlin, you could, it was like one giant bargain.
It was a good investment.
A good investment. But so what we did is we bought a heavy hammer at one of the East German hardware stores, and I had Jeff up on my shoulders, and he took it to the wall.
Wow.
And he got a lot of the original graffiti, which he was giving away as Hanukkah presents to people.
Really?
And later on it became a cottage industry to paint over the original paint where they broke off the original graffiti, paint more graffiti, and sell that. So it's interesting because when my son applied to medical school, they asked for an essay, and he wrote about his experiences with the Berlin Wall. And we were there when the Brandenburg Gate opened up and so forth.
Wow.
In fact, I was at a bar when the the wall came down, and who's playing in the bar? It was an Israeli band, or there were some Israelis in the band, so it was the
Quite
guys.
ironic.
The guys saying, "Hey, play Hava Nagila, play Yishalayim Shel Zahav," or something like this, and they were playing this music. It was wild in the middle of Germany, and so on. That was quite a series of interesting experiences. We also we were in Germany when the Gulf War broke out, and as in anticipation of the Gulf War, I was, as the chief of chaplains of the medical command, I was commuting back and forth to Washington, D.C., because I was involved in the war plans to open up mothballed hospitals and throughout Europe, because the original thought was that we might lose up to 20,000 troops in the first week of the war. Thank God, nothing near that.
Yeah.
And we just were able to roll over Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard and the like. But it was an interesting situation, because we had the soldiers that were deploying to Iraq from Germany, and their families were in Germany. They weren't in the United States. So there was an issue: was what if any of these soldiers, these battalions, were wiped out in the war? What would we do with the families? They didn't have their support groups there and so forth. They weren't back in the States with their extended family. So we had to develop all kinds of plans, and God forbid, in the event that their loved ones had been hurt or damaged or killed in Iraq. And I remember once our command psychiatrist had a real wild quip, because we had to make plans to evacuate the families from Europe, but also they had a lot of pets. And so you have to evacuate the pets too. So I remember the psychiatrist saying,